Fullmetal Alchemist, a show about the Elric brothers trying to earn their humanity back after using alchemy to try and revive their dead mother. Ever since I was a teen, I loved watching the original series. It was deep, it had action, it had catchy music, and it was one of my favorite animes to watch every Friday on Bionics. Years later, I got the chance to see Brotherhood, but up to Season 5. Yeah, thanks Netflix, you dicks. So because of that, I have to use wikis and YouTube to tell you about the 5th and final season. But despite that issue, I enjoyed Brotherhood much more than the original. It had better action scenes than the 2003 version, its plot was deeper and delved further into major events such as the Ishvalan War, and it was hilarious. So since I enjoy Brotherhood more than the original show, I want to cover a certain aspect for this list, making fun of Ed's height. Joking aside though, I will be talking about the homunculi, or the sins, whichever translation you go by. For those of you that don't know what a homunculi is, I'll explain it in brief. A homunculus is a sin's personification, or a human injected with the Philosopher's Stones, with cases like Lingyao or Hohenheim. I won't count Hohenheim on the list because although his body was used as a base for the main villain of the show, I don't think he fits with the entries on this list because it's like mixing an M&M into a bowl of Smarties, and Lingyao I'll cover in a bit. As I stated though, this is for Brotherhood, so if you've only seen the original, this might be confusing, which I do understand. But for the origins of the homunculi, they all came from the main villain named Father, wanting to remove the sins from his body and become pure. Now that that's out of the way, the only rule is that they have to be from the Brotherhood anime. Aside from that, it's fair game. Oh, and spoiler alert. So with that boring disclaimer out of the way, let's rock it! To start this off is my least favorite homunculi. Where do I begin with this person? Well, one, he did kill Mace Hughes, one of my favorite characters in the series, and his shapeshifting ability is pretty unique, especially for a series that mainly revolves around alchemy. Plus, he was responsible for starting the Ishvalan Civil War, which resulted in the near extinction of the Ishvalan race. But despite these positives, it's overshadowed by the negatives. Envy's voice is annoying to listen to. At first I could ignore it because Envy rarely made an appearance, but after Lust's death, Envy appears in the series more often. Lovely. He also sucks at fighting. Since he can't fight in his normal body without getting his ass kicked, he has to transform into a CGI mode. Hell, even when Envy transforms into Roy to try and kill Riza and fails, he gets owned like a Street Fighter noob. And not even his death is satisfying. He pulls out his own Philosopher's Stone and kills himself.
That's it?
Unfortunately, yes. What better way to follow up Envy with a homunculi that has an ego as big as Bender? Pride is the strongest of the homunculi, and his long-range style of attacks is useful in battle as long as it's in darkness. Pride is similar to the main villain of Brotherhood, as he views humans as slaves or things to be played with, and this also goes with his personality. Like his sin, he's extremely arrogant when he fights. One thing I hate about this guy though is his attitude. He resorts to petty taunts and insults his opponents that are beneath him, such as humans. That's something a generic movie bully would do. What doesn't help is what he does in the Season 4 finale. After the fight with Alphonse, he steals Kimberly's Philosopher's Stone when he's near death. What the hell? And even before that, he stole Gluttony's because he was near death. Did this guy have a greed moment or something? And then it gets even worse. When he fought Edward later on, and was losing, rather than die in his own body, he tries to hijack Ed's body in a last-ditch attempt to survive, but fails and not only gets his mind screwed, which wasn't helped by Kimberly retaining his personality and talking to Pride, mind you, he turns into a fetus. Really? Really? The funny thing about Sloth is that when I look back on the seasons, the more I question his existence. He may have been responsible for the tunnels under Amestris, but that could have been done by anybody. However, he is the fastest of the homunculi despite his large size. He has superb endurance, taking several death blows before eventually biting the bullet. Sloth fights with his fists, just like Armstrong, and can even rip through rock and steel with his bare hands, and with skin as strong as Greed's, he's a force to be reckoned with in a fight. But that's really all we know about him, because he doesn't talk much in the series and we don't really know much else. Or maybe it's because the Slackoff's writing this entry. This next homunculus is named the Ultimate Spear. You may not have started a war like Envy, or as strong as Pride, but Lust still has good enough points to justify her spot on my list. For one, she's very intelligent. One example I can think of was when Roy Mustang begins to figure out the truth about the homunculus. Lust disguises herself as a human with the name Solaris, and dates Roy's friend, Jean Havoc, to get info on what Roy was doing. The fact that she was able to do this without getting caught is very impressive, which also relates to her manipulation trait, because if Jean was an idiot, Roy would be screwed because Lust would know what he'd be doing. I also like her fighting style. As her name implies, she is a user of long-range attacks through extending her fingernails to ridiculous lengths, and they're able to cut through anything with ease. My only real complaints with Lust are that she didn't do much in Brotherhood, which is why she's not that much higher, and her death by Roy isn't satisfying. Earlier she left Roy near death, and when he comes back, she gets incinerated and does nothing to fight back until it's too late. Really? So, in the end, it looks like Lust just got burned. This next entry is rather ironic considering this guy worked with Lust until her death. Gluttony the Voracious is an interesting case. Although his face may be a little... he still has some good traits to him. He was considered by the main villain to be a gate to the entity Truth, so that he could take its powers. Though, why does it have to look like a face hugger? Sure, it may transport anyone who gets captured to an alternate dimension where they have to do a transmutation to get out, but that face! Like the sin he's named after, Gluttony can eat anything. Food, walls, crappy CD albums, he can eat it. But this guy also has a highly developed sense of smell, which is a very good trait to have when fighting in the dark. And this may just be me, but this guy makes me chuckle when he says something. It may be his voice, but this guy entertains me whenever he's on screen. But that leaves me with one question. Why did he have to be killed by Pride? So what, he can trap Edward in a freaking dimension, but he gets killed by a little boy? This next entry is Greed the Avaricious. Appearing in the Season 1 finale, he showed to be a main problem for the Elric brothers. So much, in fact, that King Bradley had to be the one to kill the first Greed. Greed defected from the homunculi a century before the series began, due to the main villain depriving Greed of his desires. Which was surprising considering that most of the homunculi still aligned with the main villain centuries after their creation. But that's the sin of Greed for you. As said previously, Greed is the ultimate shield, being impervious to physical harm for the most part. But that doesn't mean he can't fight, he's just as strong as his defense. That's right folks, Aegislash was in Fullmetal Alchemist. But once captured by Bradley and incinerated, he returns in the third season under a new body, Ling. Ling is in line to be the Emperor of Jing, and he's the comic relief of the group. Sometimes he can be likable, while other times you want to punch him in his face. He wants the Philosopher's Stone so that it would increase his chance of being the Emperor. As such, he becomes the new host of Greed. Gone is Ling, for the most part, and Greed takes over. He has the same abilities as before, but he has no memories of his previous life. No, nothing like that. Because unlike Deviant the Hedgehog, Greed still acts the same as his past life. He just doesn't have any memories of it. That is until he kills his friend Beto. But the one quality I like about Greedling over the original Greed is his new charisma. Example, when Edward asks Greed to join him and his friends, Rather than act over emotional or anything, he keeps his calm demeanor and basically says, I won't join you, but you can join me. Plus, I enjoy this guy's fight against Bradley in Central Command. And when Ling takes over, he kicks Bradley's ass and nearly destroys his ultimate eye. And even in this final fight with the main villain, he managed to hold his own before dying. And then we find out that the one thing he really needed was friends, like the Elric brothers. Seriously?
Damn you, Faust, and your friendships!
Through process of elimination, number 1 is one that surprised me. Number 1 is a character that died content with his existence. Number 1 is... Wrath, also known as Wrath the Furious. It may be an odd choice because he's a human mixed in with the homunculus, but everything else about him makes me put him this high on the countdown. With the exception of Greedling, King Bradley was born human and then injected with Wrath later in his life. Originally born as number 12, Wrath was born into a program designed to find the perfect ruler of the Amestris nation by taking male children from their birthplaces and secretly raising them. Once the training was complete, they were all injected with the Philosopher's Stone to bear Wrath. Although the others in the program failed to bear him, number 12 survived and became known as Wrath/King Bradley. So already Wrath has points in my book for having a deep backstory. But what good is that when everything else sucks? Am I right, Eisen? Well, luckily, Wrath has several more positives to him, so let's cover them. I like his personality for the most part. Unlike the sin he personifies, Wrath is for the most part calm and collected, which made me even more shocked that he was Wrath the whole time, because the sin of Wrath is just mindless revenge. Another difference between him and the other homunculi is that he has a closer bond with humans due to spending most of his time with them. And even likes that the Elric brothers are going to try and stop the homunculus' plans because he grew up where everything had been planned, controlled, or predicted. I also like Wrath's fighting style. Wrath is able to use his left eye, concealed in his eye patch, to give him tremendous sight, as well as some minor effects including predicting an opponent's move. But he doesn't just use his eyes for combat like Itachi's Genjutsu. Wrath also uses swords. So combine his training with swords and an all-seeing eye, it'd be in your best interest to never cross with
Demon Pirate King Bradley.
But that's really all I gotta say for that. But before I go, I do want to discuss one last thing. I mentioned before that Wrath liked the fact the Elric brothers were trying to stop the homunculus' plans because he grew up where everything had been planned, controlled, or predicted. I want to bring this up again because of what happens in the final season. After King Bradley returns and kicks some ass in Amestria, before being blinded, he retreats into the sewers to assist the main villain's plans. He has a final fight with Scar and jokes that, like himself, Scar wasn't born with a name either, meaning he can enjoy a final battle. At this point, Wrath is near death due to the fight in Amestris, but he's still able to hold his own against Scar for a bit. When the battle ends, Wrath is almost dead. When Lanfan, the granddaughter of a man killed in the Battle of Amestris, arrives to avenge him, she asks Wrath if he has any last words, to which he replies no. Lanfan then states his life was truly sad and asks him if he loved anyone, to which he tells her not to utter those words with little knowledge. We then find out the truth about Wrath's wife. She was chosen by him, not anyone else. This means that he had a moment where he planned his future, no one else. Then he dies. I know I should feel happy that a homunculus is dead, but I don't have that feeling with Wrath. His personality, his backstory, his own morality, it made me care about him. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this show is the Bohemian Rhapsody of the anime world, because no anime is. But if a character can make me feel sadness when they're gone, I have a large amount of respect for that character, because they made me care about what they went through to get to the end of their station. I'm the Mountie Chief, and no matter what someone says about you never succeeding, just know that you can always change that fate. Thank you for watching.